I want to take advantage also of this opportunity to first thank you again for your support, your constant support, always being there, bringing me also more ideas to improve the channel, to improve the content. And today, as I said before, is a very special occasion for me because I am, presenting in this occasion, not just a co-host, not just a colleague, also one of my closest friends in tourism, a person that is of my entire esteem, a good friend of mine, one of the best tour guides I know in the whole country. He is also an archaeologist like Marek. And we will talk about today about a lot of different things, interesting things related with his hometown, Cusco. His name is Mike Lazo. Hola, Mike. Welcome to
Hello.
me today.
Hello.
Hello, hello, hello. Nice to see all of you.
Mike is a person that has my entire trust in terms of not just culture, history of his town, Cusco. He's also a very, very well-traveled person. And he's been doing trips in Cusco for many years. Actually, how many times you've been able to walk the Inca Trail, Mike?
I think over 500 times.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
My
So
knees
he
are gone by
has the
now.
best, but he has the best stories. So I will not let's say keep on holding anymore this meeting. The precious time of Mike is really also very important. So thank you so much for being here. And today Mike is going to be sharing with you a topic that I find also very interesting, very important for anyone that wants to visit Cusco, his hometown. This is today is going to be the explanation of how Cusco city used to be back in the Inca times, and also the perception how Cusco was seen before the eyes of the Incas, the indigenous people of Cusco. So, well, Mike, thank you so much, and you can start anytime.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me first to your platform. That mic that when Vanessa was talking about, I have no idea who's that. But thank you. Thank you so much for all the accolades you just said. I really appreciate your invitation. And well, this is a really good way for us to show part of our culture and also to try to invite people that eventually wanted to come to Peru, that maybe we can explain a little bit, and eventually you are going to find our country like a really good tourism destination. And you can tell your friends that history is important, and probably we have the best views in South America, if it's not in the whole world. So what we want to talk about today is the city of Cusco on the eyes of the pre-Inca people, the Incas, in the colonial time. But we're going to try to make a resume of um, all this, because it takes a lot of time to explain more than maybe 3,000 years of culture that we have all over Peru. But the most important part for me to tell you is that for you to have a good understanding of what Cusco was before, and what the city of Cusco represented for the local people first, all right? Now, one thing that you must know is that we have a very important chronicle here in, well, we had it here in Peru. His name was the famous Garcilaso de la Vega. He was one of the most important mixed race chronicles we have in Peru. And I want to start this explanation of a translation I had from the real commentaries of the Incas that Garcilaso de la Vega wrote. I'm just going to read it to you. It's a translation that I made for you to understand how important Cusco was for the Inca people, right? It goes like this. One of the main idols that the Inca kings had was the imperial city of Cusco, with which the Indians worship as a sacred thing because it was founded by the first Inca, Manco Cápac, in such a way that they show their adoration in very small things, also because it was the house of the court of the Incas and their gods. When two Indians of equal conditions ran into each other on the roads, the one who came from Cusco and one who was going to Cusco, the one who was coming from Cusco was respected as a superior only because he was coming from the city, and the other one showed all his respect. The same thing happened with all the food and any products that came out of Cusco to other parts. We are talking about a person who was born in 1539. You must remember that the Castellanos, I want to have that clear. We have to stop calling them the Spanish people. I will explain a little bit why. The Castellanos arrived 1532, roughly. Garcilaso de la Vega was born in 1539. So all the information he had, it came from a very good source from his mom, grandmother, and the people that he grew up with, all right? He was born, this Garcilaso de la Vega was born in Cusco, and as I said, he was the first mixed race we had, one of the first mixed race we had in Peru. And his father was a Spanish soldier, and his mother was a noble woman by the name of Isabel Chimpuoglu. He moved to Spain when he was 21 years old, where his name was still Gómez Suárez de Figueroa. When he turned 23, they start calling him the Inca Garcilaso de la Vega in order to insult this guy as a derogatory name. But he kept this nickname, if you will, because he respected his culture. The time he wrote the real commentaries of the Incas was pretty much before he passed away when he was 70 years old. All right, he died in 1616. So when he wrote all this information, a lot of people follow what he wanted to explain about the city of Cusco and about the Inca culture. However, he made a lot of mistakes because he was trying to show his culture like it was a perfect culture, that the Incas were probably the greatest culture in South America and probably Mesoamerica, but it wasn't perfect. But with the idea of overcome probably all the insults he was getting from his superiors, like the Spanish, he tried to show his culture as pretty much a perfect culture, right? So did we have the picture, Vane, of the Inca Garcilaso de la Vega? All right, that was the guy, all right? That was the Inca Garcilaso de la Vega. Now, I want to explain something, and hopefully it's gonna get clear. The language, do you know, well, I think you are Marek's family, right? What is the language, the main language we speak in Peru? Do you have any idea?
Quechua.
Well, what do you think, Michelle? What is the language we speak?
Well, I'm reading a book right now, and I'm trying to remember. It was something like Rumisani?
Runasimi.
Yes.
All right, that's the Inca language. But the main language we speak, people always call it Spanish. All right, that's a mistake. We speak Castellano because the conquistadors came from Castilla. Correct? In that language, Vane, ¿podrías por favor pasar la siguiente foto?
Yes, this one?
All right, do we have it? Can you all see that picture? If you read in the upper part, that's Cusco, right? The way you spell Cusco, C-U-Z-C-O. That's the Castellano way to pronounce the name of the town or the name of the city. And right now, this is a panoramic view of how the city of Cusco looks like, with roughly 450,000 people. Almost 500,000 is our population, right? But in the Incas' time, the name of the city in Runasimi was Qosqo. Can you see in the under that figure, Qosqo? Qosqo. What does that word mean in Runasimi? That means the navel, the center of the universe, the belly button. Because for the Incas, the city of Qosqo was the most important and the capital of the Inca Empire. How many people we had roughly by then? Probably inside of the city, what you have over here, the Puma city, maybe 40,000 people. And the borders of the city were between, if you can read over there in the upper part, it says Tullumayu. That is, the translation will be the river of bones. And the other one, Sapi over here, that in the translation will be the root or the beginning, that both of the rivers are gonna go to the end until where is the tail of this Puma. And those two rivers are still running under the two, Tullumayo Street and Avenida del Sol, those two main avenues that we have in Cusco, right? Now, in the Inca cosmovision, we have that the city of Qosqo had the shape of a puma. A lot of chronicles from nowadays and also maybe 10, 15 years ago, they try to change this information saying that the Spaniards, with the idea of compare the Inca culture with the European culture, they said that when they wrote the information about the Puma city or the Lion city, they tried to compare our culture with the Spanish culture. That's why they probably chose this animal, and actually they didn't have, the city didn't have the shape of a puma. In 2008, the Ministry of Culture, they made an investigation. ¿Podrías pasar la siguiente, Vani? They made an investigation. This place over here, it's called Sacsayhuaman, and that is considered the head of the puma. And why is the reason we consider that place the head of the puma? There is a cross where John Paul II, he did the Holy Mass, and in that place, in 2008, the Ministry of Culture found a lot of bones, a lot of jaws of pumas. In this way, we think that the Andean people or the Incas were trying to show that actually Sacsayhuaman was the head of the puma, being, la siguiente foto, por favor, Vane. Being this part, that triangular shape, Tullumayo Street is in the upper part, and the other one is Avenida del Sol. So those two rivers are going to get together, and that is the formation of the tail of the puma. All right? So that is in the Inca cosmovision. That is what they were trying to represent, the figure of the puma. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great, great. So what was the city of Qosqo for the Incas back in the time? A lot of people, when they come to Peru, the first impression is that I want to go to Machu Picchu. The place is amazing, all right? The place is 75% original, and Cusco has a lot of restoration. But for the Incas, when they probably built the construction in the 1200s or maybe before, the city of Qosqo was the most important place, where this area was full of palaces and worshiping places, in such a way that when the Spaniards arrived here, or the Europeans, the Castellanos arrived to Qosqo City, in order to do the eradication of idolatries, in order to disappear our culture, our philosophy, they destroyed every single palace and worshiping place to build churches. It was the biggest genocide in South America. After 11 years of the Spanish presence, 65% of the population disappeared out of massacres, rapes, and she's killing the virgins of the sun and all the children. All right? Is it so far? Is it clear? Is it clear about the Puma City?
Yes.
All right. Do you guys have any questions so far?
I don't.
Okay. Okay.
And please,
So,
by the way, guys, just in case if you have a question, you can also use the chat section. So in that way, we can also, well, go back to those questions at the end of the exposition of Mike. So thank you so much.
all right. So, there was an investigation in 1952 by the professor Luis Barrera Murillo. And going to the east of the city of Qosqo, there is a population called Queros, which is, according to some people, maybe the last remains of the Inca culture. They still dressed as the old ways. They speak the Runasimi language, pure Runasimi language. And when they went there in 1952, the whole town of Queros was empty. And Dr. Luis Barrera Murillo started asking one person, one of the few people that was around there, and they said, "Where is everyone?" To what the few people were staying in that part, they said, "Well, they're what they're supposed to be doing. They're working. So is this place always empty?" And they said, "No, it's only with a lot of people that come from different parts of the mountains in special locations." What are the special occasions for? What were the special occasions for my culture? June 21st to June 24 and December 22, the winter solstice and the summer solstice, right? In order to worship the sun. The same thing happened with the city of Qosqo. It wasn't probably 40,000 people living on that part because they were living around and they were working the land, and only there is a huge difference between the Incas and the Andean people. Only the kings, only the emperors, only the higher class of the society live in the city of Qosqo, maybe on that distribution of the Puma City. The rest of how Garcilaso de la Vega called them, the rest of the Indios or the Andean people, the workers, the lower class of the society were living outside in the mountains. Doing what? Working. But when it was on a specific occasion, maybe the Inca was sick or they had to pass the Mascaipacha or the throne to the next person, is when the rest of the population went there also in June 21st, the festivity of the sun, also in December 22, and those important occasions, all right? So Qosqo City probably wasn't with a lot of people all the time. In this way, when the Castellanos arrived to the city, they were so surprised because they arrived in 1532. And when they saw how healthy the city was, when they saw how important was the social classes in the Inca's time, when they saw the organization, one of the important Spanish chroniclers, he said, this city is nothing to be or nothing to have to another cities in Spain. It should actually be in Spain because it was so beautiful. And we're only talking about the center of the city. We're not even talking about the archaeological sites that are around, all right? So in the Inca cosmovision, the city of Qosqo was very, very important and probably much more important than other places, all right? Felipe Guaman Poma de Ayala, another mixed race writer, maybe more Andean, more local than Garcilaso de la Vega. He also said that Qosqo City was so important that Pachacuti, don't forget this name, please. It's very important in our culture. His full name or his real name was Cusi Yupanqui. But after he won different battles and turned the culture into the Inca Empire, they changed his name to Pachacute Inca Yupanqui. This guy decided to build different cities like Qosqo in other parts, like in Quito. The place in Ecuador, Quito, it's something similar than Qosqo, but not as beautiful as Qosqo. And in different parts of what it was called the Tahuantinsuyo or the Inca culture, different cities similar to Qosqo, but nothing as beautiful as this place. All right? So that is what the city of Qosqo represented for the Incas. Vanesita, ¿puedes cambiar la siguiente foto, por favor? The city of Qosqo and its construction. For instance, this wall that you can see over here is the famous Hatun Rumillo. The translation for this will be big rock, Hatun Rumillo. According many writers, according many of my colleagues, this was the palace of Inca Roca, one of the important Incas from the dynasty Hanan, or from the dynasty, the upper part of the social class. But the investigations of Mr. Barreda Murillo showed us, before he died, that this structure is 100 years before the city of Qosqo was built. So the Inca culture started in the 1200s. So in this construction is probably 100 years before, from the time of the Lucre culture. What is that going to tell us? That maybe the Incas, when they arrived to the valley of Qosqo, they already found a lot of constructions, and it didn't happen from one year to another, or maybe in 20, 30, 50 years. This place was full with beautiful constructions before the Incas arrived, and the Incas made them better. It's not like only the Incas arrived here and they built all these kind of constructions. If you can see in this kind of construction, you don't have any kind of mortar or clay in between the rocks. It's just rock, stone with stone fitted together. How did they did that? ¿Puedes pasar a la siguiente foto, Vane, por favor? Look, this is the famous 12-angle stone on the same street. How did they put those rocks together? By a technique of trial and error. Do you understand that? Basically, what they did was put one rock together and then try to put another rock on top. And if it didn't fit, they took it down and they polish it and they put it back again. All right. And in the middle, they will put another rocks with a lot of pressure. All right. But the most famous technique was trial and error. We have constructions like this around the city. And that's the reason we can tell that the city of Cusco is full with syncretism. This is syncretism also in construction. What I'm trying to tell you is, do any of you guys know what I mean when I say syncretism?
Because like Michelle's read
I took anthropology at university, and so the concept I remember are things like wheels, where two different cultures who are not connected both develop the same technology.
Yes, so both of the cultures, they don't match, but they are going to go together and they mix. All right. So that's what we have nowadays in Qosqo City. We are going to leave behind probably the understanding of the Inca culture before. What we have nowadays is a mix of two cultures, right? And we have a mix of two cultures in our beliefs. There's a lot of people who believe in the power of the Mother Earth, the power of the sun, the power of the Pachamama, which is the Mother Earth, right? And at the same time, they are Catholic. Roughly 85% of the Peruvian population are Catholic. 15% follow other concepts, right? And that's in our theory in religion and philosophy, but also in architecture. The wall that you just saw is an Inca wall, and you have a colonial construction on top. So that's also a mix of cultures when it comes to architecture, all right? La siguiente foto, Vanesita, por favor. All right, this is This is, for instance, look, Cusco looks like another planet, right? It's really beautiful. In my personal modest opinion, Cusco is probably has one of the most beautiful main squares or squares that I've seen in South America. That's over there is the main cathedral. And it was built on the foundations of the Pachacutec's father, Huiracocha. That was his palace. That was his worshiping place. Like they knew this was a very important worshiping place. They took it down, but the Inca foundations and the Inca walls are still inside of the church. That's another kind of syncretism, right? Siguiente foto, Vanesita. Up there, you can see where is the last church. That is called Colcampata, or San Cristobal will be the Catholic name. That was the palace of the most important Inca, the first Inca, Manco Cápac, that one up there. And in the upper part, can you see the cross? That cross is Cruzpata. That's the place where they found all the puma jaws. When they dug in the ground, they found all the puma jaws, right? Siguiente foto, Vanesita, por favor. That one was another palace, and now is the Jesuits church, all right? And you can see all these three churches around the beautiful main square. So that's what we have nowadays. Now, when the Spanish arrived here in 1532, they made the foundation of the city as Qosqo City, or the loyal city of Qosqo, or Nueva Castilla, that's another name, and already start doing all that syncretism between Andean people and between the Spanish culture, right? But nowadays in Qosqo City in 2021, we have another kind of syncretism, because nowadays Peru, it's a little bit different. What we have in Peru is people who believe in the Pachamama and also are religious, right? But with the new era, Cusco couldn't stay behind. So we have other buildings. Siguiente foto, Vanesita, por favor. Look what we have over here. Can you see that red arrow? That red arrow is part of an Inca wall that probably from the 1400s. On top of that wall, we have Starbucks. All right. La siguiente foto, Vanesita. Look at those walls. That's a perfect wall, and it doesn't have any anything in between the rocks. It's another kind of Inca imperial construction. All that wall. Siguiente foto, Vanesita. That one, look, that wall is also the street, the Triumph, right? And we have Patty's Bar. Now, Qosqo City is full of, well, pretty much until 2019, pretty much all year long was full with tourism, right? I think at some point, we got a little bit confused in between what Cusco's remains should be shown to people and what we want to build for the people's comfort, all right? I don't think it's a bad thing, but certain parts of the monumental cast should be respected and all should be only for the people to be admired. But that's my personal modest opinion, right? Now I want to show you something else on the right-hand side. Otra foto, Vanesita. This is a picture from 1948. That's the main cathedral. And you can see over there how there is still a water channel running in the middle of the main square. That's how this beautiful square used to look like before, right? Those are the traditional dresses from the local people, and it's probably more empty than it looks right now. Siguiente foto, Vanesita. This is from 1952, right? And you can see where is that arrow is the same water canal that we have. And these people who are on those small shelters, thank you. The people who are on those small shelters, this is on a Sunday. Well, it could be on a Sunday or it could be on a Wednesday because they are exchanging products. In our language, this is trueque, right? People from different parts of Cusco, they will come down and from the mountains, and if they have probably a lot of potatoes and didn't have corn, they will exchange corn for potatoes, and also they will exchange corn for cocales or maybe some vegetables, right? This is already after the Europeans arrived here. And how the city of Qosqo looks like right now. Siguiente foto, Vanesita. That's the city of Qosqo, right? You can see on the left side the main cathedral, the Jesuit church, and all. If you come to Cusco, eventually you're going to see a lot of the balconies around the main square that also are from the colonial time. All right. So in general lines, in every single place that we're going to see in the city of Qosqo, we're going to see different parts of the Peruvian history, of the Peruvian time. We're going to see pre-Inca culture before 1200s. We're going to see Inca culture because the constructions are still there, even though we had very strong earthquakes in 1950 and 1990 as well. The Inca constructions never collapsed. And also we're going to see the colonial constructions after the invasion and what we can call right now civilization, if you will, destroying a little bit the beautiful culture, one of the most beautiful cultures we have in South America, right? So far, any question, please? I actually really like questions. And I really, it's very interesting that you're studying anthropology, Michelle.
Oh, well, I studied. It was like 20 years ago.
I'm pretty sure you remember some. Any of you, please, will have a question. Maybe Vanessa will have a question. Any of you guys?
Yes, I have a question, and it's about, first of all, well, it's very clear that Cusco used to have the shape of the puma. Were there any other cities nearby Cusco or made by the Incas that resembled any other totems that were worshipped by the Incas? Is there any evidence of that?
There's no evidence, but there are some theories about other places, other construction being are to, well, not similar, but being with the shape or resembling other totems, right? There is one act that I actually find funny, but we try to be respectful of other people's theories. One actually guide mentioned that Machu Picchu had a shape of a crocodile. If you Google that, you're gonna find Machu Picchu having the shape of a crocodile. The Incas, first of all, never arrived to the deep jungle. They stay in the high jungle. Machu Picchu is located in the high jungle, right? Over 2,400 meters above sea level. In the deep jungle, where you have 100 or 200 meters above sea level, we never found any kind of archaeological site from the Incas' time. Besides that, in South America, we don't have crocodiles. We have a caiman, which is a little bit smaller and doesn't have the crocodile shell, if you will. So that idea, I think, it's a little bit confusing. I do not share that theory. There's some other guides as well that mention Ollantaytambo, it's an archaeological site on the Sacred Valley, had a shape of a corn, all right? But they took a picture in 1993 where there were already a lot of houses that probably gave that shape, but it wasn't like that before, all right? There is another place inside of Ollantaytambo that has the shape of a llama, but some of the terraces are also restored and reconstructed, and the shape wasn't like that. And a lot of the constructions that we have along the Sacred Valley, they have a lot of reconstruction and restoration. Let's make something clear. The reconstruction is when you rebuild the place the way you think it looked like before. The restoration is just to preserve the area. And when they did a lot of reconstruction, the archaeological site lost the shape it had before. Also, when you go to Machu Picchu, there is another mountain called Huayna Picchu. And when you stay at the top and you use your imagination, Machu Picchu has the shape of a bird flying upside down. What happened? What you can see of Machu Picchu, as big as it is only the 40% of the construction. 60% is still under the vegetation. Because when Bingham arrived to the place, the vegetation got attached to the construction. And when they chopped the vegetation, some constructions collapsed. So like now the place is protected by the UNESCO. You can't make any kind of investigation there. But if you chop the vegetation, the bird is gonna lose its shape, all right? Why do we say that Qosqo City had the shape of a puma? Because the writers from the 16th century, when they arrived, even this person, Pedro Cieza de León, considered the prince because he loved the Inca culture. He mentions the shape of a lion in the city. But remember, we don't have lions, right? So I'm pretty sure they were talking about the puma. So we always defend the theory of the Qosqo being the Puma city and not others, because the Spanish writers wrote about that. Besides that, Garcilaso de la Vega, the important mixed race person we talk about, this Andean chronicler who lived in Spain, he talks about these streets that until nowadays exist. Like, for instance, Puma Curco in Qosqo City, right? Which means the spine of the puma. Or the bad pronunciation of Sacsayhuaman, that actually could be Saxa Uma. Uma being head, and Saxa is festoon head, like trying to show the head of the puma, right? So there's another explanation, for instance, that the Incas probably wanted to put the shape of a puma in the city. Have you ever heard of the Titicaca Lake?
Yes.
In Puno, the border between Peru and Bolivia, right? Titicaca, actually, when you talk to the guys, is a bad pronunciation of Tetecaca. And Tete means mountain lion or puma, and Caca means rock. So they probably, around that area a long time ago, they saw these pumas and they decided that it was going to be their totem, the puma made of rock or something like that. That is the real name of the lake. And the Inca people coming from Bolivia pretty much, or from that part of the Altiplano, maybe they took the same story to the city of Qosqo, because before they built the city. So it has some good ideas between the chroniclers, Garcilaso de la Vega, the history of the Titicaca in the other part, in the south of Qosqo City. But the rest of the theories of other archaeological sites having shapes of other totems, we don't have scientific proof, if you will, but everyone is allowed to have their own theories and thoughts about something, because we never found a writing system from the Inca culture. So the only thing we can do is try to be responsible and give you theories and speculations, if you will, as close as we can to the scientific truth. All right? Any other question, please? Any other question?
Well, I'm reading The Last Days of the Incas by Kim McQuarrie, and in it she talks about when the conquistadors first arrived to Cusco and how beautiful Cusco was. And they said that there were gold tiles on the east side of all the buildings in the main square, so that way when the sun came up, it was just blinding gold. Is that factual to the best of our knowledge, or?
What I can tell you is, first of all, remember that the Incas never had currency, right? So gold or silver was the representation, both of them, of the tears of the sun and the tears of the moon that they worshipped. So it was to make idols, all right? There are no proofs whatsoever in any of the buildings of how they will actually put that piece of metal on the wall. Because for you to do those kind of things, you have to have anchors, if you will. Correct? So it's nothing that we can prove. Did they have a lot of idols made of gold and made of silver? This is true because they found graves, even in the north part of Peru, different pre-Inca cultures, they did have a lot of gold or silver. I do not believe that the walls were maybe they didn't put like any pieces of gold or silver. That's not a proof. They built beautiful constructions, but I think they were more concerned about the locations of the streets and the location of the archaeological complex. All of the terraces that you're going to find in the archaeological site are always facing east. That's correct, because that creates a kind of greenhouse. When the sun comes out every single day, it's going to shine over the terraces, and that creates different temperatures when you have different elevations, all right? All their houses were always facing to the east. When you come to the city of Qosqo, where Paris was located, next to the cathedral, those two important streets, every June 21st, the sun shines through those streets, right? So I think the idea of a lot of people, of the Incas having their houses plastered with gold is a little bit of an exaggeration, I will say. There were a few chroniclers who actually described the city of Qosqo as beautiful, as organized, and they talk about the Coricancha temple, that I think is on the last day of the Incas as well, that they had animals and plants on natural size made of gold and silver, all right? Besides that, when you say that all their houses and their tiles were plastered with gold, that seems like a little bit of an effort and a little bit pretentious probably for a culture that didn't have currency. The idea of the Incas having a lot of gold comes from the Spanish greedy for the gold. They actually wanted a lot of gold, and it comes this history of this legend of El Paititi, the golden city. When they didn't want to pay the rescue to one of the last Incas, they had to hide the gold, otherwise they were going to kill him, right? But I think the Incas were more concerned about other things. They did have idols. This is true. They might have idols or maybe copies of their mummies that they call malquis, maybe made of gold, sometimes made of silver. But I think, but this is again my personal modest opinion, it might be a waste of time for them to do these kind of things. Not even another very rich culture, the Mayans, they had idols, but they didn't have their tiles plastered with gold, right? So I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration. This guy, Guamán Poma de Ayala, it's a very interesting guy to read because he's an Andean person talking about his own culture, and he talks about maybe the mummies, or how the Inca society was, or how the city of Qosqo was, of the Spanish conquistadors, but they never mention anything about the tiles being plastered with gold. So I will say that's probably an exaggeration. It might be true, we don't know, but I think that's a little bit far from the truth.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
One question
any other
about
question?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Could you say something about the technology, or well, let me say technology for those times, how they prepare so big rocks to put them together with this precise way to put exactly, no? Mm-hmm. How to cut this very hard rocks and make it smooth precisely. Mm-hmm.
Well, do you want to know how they did it? First of all, for the Incas to bring the rocks, it wasn't a complication due to the amount of people they had working. With Vanessa, we were watching one of our colleagues that he made a lot of investigations about the actual weight of the rock. So sometimes people will go, again, on an exaggeration of, let's say, a rock of 200 tons, right? When they actually use mathematics, this rock, it might be 80, 100 tons. It's still a lot for a human being to move a rock like that, but not 200, right? Now, you have to think about the amount of people. It wasn't 10 people. It wasn't 100. It was thousands and thousands of people working in turns. What I'm saying about turns is like you work all day, probably paying your taxes, because that's how the Andean people pay their taxes, by labor. And after you got tired, to maximize the effort of the people, they were replaced by other hundreds or thousands of people. All right. Also, Luis Barreda Murillo, under the Coricancha temple, which is located in Qosqo, under the construction, when they dug out, they found these small portions of rocks, of these big rocks, the same material. What does that mean? They didn't cut these rocks like a lot of people talk with lasers, or they have a special use of plants to make the rock softer. So they actually will cut the rock from the places they will take the rocks, like maybe 40, 50 kilometers. They work from the quarry, they work the rock, they cut the rock, and they move it over different trucks and ramps. When they go to the place, they finish the production of the rock. And it's, as I said, the trial and error. So you have one rock here, and if you want for this one to go exactly like the other, you try, and it doesn't fit. So you took it down, and you polish the edges, and then you put it back again. And in the middle of these two rocks, maybe like this, if you have an empty space, you polish another rock, and you put it with pressure, right? And the more angles you have in the rock, the more stable the construction is. Now, there is a lot of people who don't believe the Incas could do that kind of job. But you have to remember that the oldest culture we have in Peru is Caral, close to Vanessa. We're talking about almost 4,000 years before Christ. The Tiahuanaco pre-Inca culture is older as well. So they have hundreds of years of knowledge on working in the rock. It's like the more you practice, the better you get at something, right? So it's not like they were improvising. They were actually experts. And most of the constructions, they were built, megalithic constructions, were built and they were constructed by people from the Altiplano in Bolivia, from the Tiahuanaco pre-Inca culture. That's the style. Those were the best builders, engineers. Also part of the culture, there were certain really good metal, Nazca construction in the part of Bolivia. So they brought all of these guys to build certain constructions because they were experts at doing something. And that's what the Inca culture did. They put a lot of knowledge together and they make the best culture in South America. Do you guys have any other question? I hope we're not running out of time.
Mike, I have also sort of like a question, but
yes.
The answer to this will have to be properly developed maybe on, I'm trying to hook you for another episode of this conversation. And, the question is, I am seeing that there is a emerging like group of colleagues and archaeologists that
Yes.
are debating all of what has been established so far for decades about, for example, the trilogy, the Andean trilogy, the Chacana, all the things that I've learned in school, I learned when I became a tour guide. Possibly you learned when you became tour guide, when you were studying archaeology, but they are currents that are debating all of these preset ideas about the trilogy, as I said before, the Chacana. And could you please just let us know briefly something? And also, can I have your compromise for another meeting, like explaining this much widely?
More than happy to assist to any of your events. More than happy to do it, because this is actually refreshing for me as well. It's been pretty much a year that I haven't been working. And as you know, before I used to hike the Inca Trail 4 to 5 times a month, where I had the explanations and the answers here, right? So it's also refreshing for me. Let me just tell you something that is, it was mind-opening 3 years ago when I did this 14-day hike on this new archaeological site called Qosqo, that I'm pretty sure is on the last day of the Incas as well, Michelle. Is that correct? Do you remember the place Qosqo?
Sorry, I couldn't hit my mute
it?
button. I haven't. I'm only halfway through the book. So
Okay.
I'm at where Perzero
So,
brothers are fighting.
Okay. So when you are going to, we're going to talk about Qosqo, this hike. You meet a lot of farmers, and you meet a lot of the horsemen very closely, because there's a point where you talk to people, and the people are so tired and cranky, and they just tell you, Mike, I just want to get to the campsite. Don't tell me more stories. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So you start talking to the farmers, and you start talking to the horsemen. And I always talk to them about the Andean trilogy is, or the Chacana is the Andean cross, all right? And it splits our culture in 3 different levels, and they have 3 different animals, and they are the representation of the 3 words, which means that each animal, in this case, the condor, puma, and snake, are part of the 3 words, and also very respected and worshipped by the local people, by the Andean people and the Incas. And I was very surprised when I talked to this horseman, and he told me, I don't know what you're talking about. Why will I respect the condor, he says. And I told him, because it's part of our culture. And he says, condor is really mean, because he takes the babies. They don't hunt because they don't have the strength on their cloth to hunt, but they do kill animals. How do they do it? They go and they find the babies that are on the edges, and they push them down. And when they fall off, they die, and they eat them. Sometimes, he also told me this, sometimes the condor goes and attacks a newborn cattle, it could be, or a horse or a sheep. The first thing they do to choose them is they tear their tongue. And to kill them and take their blood out, they eat their anus. With their beak, they take it out. And they consider the local people and the horsemen, they consider this is a very mean animal. About the puma, that is also which is talk about the Puma city for the Incas. They say that that animal is the worst of everyone, because he says when we have animals, he doesn't need to kill 2 or 3, but sometimes he kills 3 until 5 animals and only takes 1. And they're like, why do you kill more animals if you don't need them? So it's very controversial what some people think about what the Incas believe, and they thought about the animals and the trilogy, because the Chacana that we talk about, it has 3 corners for 3 animals, right? But when you go to Ollantaytambo, you have 5. When you go to El Altiplano, you have up to 7. So I think it's just something that certain guys try to accommodate for their explanations, all right? But we can discover, if we keep talking little by little, what is more convenient for each of us and what you want to believe. Because at the end of the day, I'm not the owner of the truth. I just can tell you what is my perception of after the books that I have read, and you can take your own idea. I might be wrong, I might be right. I just want to tell you what I believe of something that is very, very controversial, which is the Inca culture. Something that is very true is that they were amazing people. They were invaded and conquered by the Europeans. But something that is also controversial is that a lot of people hate the Spanish in my culture. In Peru, they say, ah, bloody Spanish. And even when some Spanish arrive to Cusco, they're like, I don't like the Spanish. But if it wasn't for the Spanish, we wouldn't have the beautiful culture that we have nowadays that we call syncretism. And the Incas, to be who they were, they also conquer other cultures. So we have to open our minds a little bit more to try to understand what were the economical necessities of each culture. And Michelle, you understand that because your archaeology can be separated from anthropology, because to understand a society is not only bones, it's also the behavior of every society. And as you know, most of the societies move from one place to another because of the economy. Not necessarily money, but economy. That is probably another topic.
Yes, that was really interesting. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Well, it was my pleasure. I'm really glad that I could share this part with all of you, and I will be more than happy to share any other topic that we might talk with Vanessa if you guys are interested. Try to invite your friends, and we're here if you have any other questions.
Thank you also very much to Mike. You've been wonderful as always. I am always delighted to hear you talking in front of your tour groups. The passion you put for your explanations is always amazing. And every time you talk about it, history, your stuff, you live it. No, you explain it with all your passion, with all your senses, and you make people live that every time you do it. No, so it's been a pleasure to have you, and thank you very much for well, being here. I hope really to have you very soon. We will be coordinating our next meeting, and well, especially I know you are doing this because, well, you want to give this special treaty to my Patreons. So once again, thank you very much to my Patreons that are here today. And Mike, he's also a tour guide. He has his own business in Cusco. Let me tell you a little bit more about him, and maybe you can give him a follow on Instagram, on Facebook, and you can also share with your friends about the wonderful job Mike is doing in Cusco. You can find him looking or searching for Papi's Treks, which is also the name he has in his sweatshirt, in his Mike, can you show please your logo? I think you have a exactly. Woo!
I'm doing some
So
now.
That's the logo. That's the logo of Papi's Treks. You can find him easily on Instagram, on Facebook, and I'm going to be also sharing this information with you. I'm going to be also sharing this because we are putting this on our YouTube platform, so it's going to be here during this video. And well, if you can help him with a like and follow, that would be super. So well, thank you so much again for joining. And next week we will have something new, something different. So finally, just to let you know that Peru is going back into a quarantine again. Things are not going to be easy again for tour guides, for the travel industry in Peru. So we're going to be in forced locked in Lima, at least for the next 2 weeks. So we'll just let you know that we are going back to March 2020. Pretty much, we're going back in time again. So, but this is going to give me the opportunity of preparing more things for you all. So, well, thank you so much. I don't know, Mike, if you want to say something finally at the end.
Oh, just thank you again for being part of this, and I'll be more than happy to share anything else if you're interested. And well, stay safe. This is getting more and more complicated all over the world. I'm pretty sure if we are responsible and stay home, I'm pretty sure we're going to overcome this disease, hopefully in a couple of months or maybe next year. But in the meantime, we're here to keep explaining and try to show you the best we can. We're going to do some more tours around the city of Cusco. Eventually, I'm going to coordinate with Vanessa to do a tour in Machu Picchu for the ones who haven't been there. And we're going to do it probably in 1 hour, 1.5 hours. Maybe we can do it in 2 sessions and go also around Cusco and different archaeological sites. Anyways, thank you so much for being part of this, and I'll see you soon.
Muchas gracias, Michael.
No,
You're
gracias.
welcome.
Yes, muy
Gracias.
interesante.
Muchas gracias.
Yeah.
No.
Thank you
Chao,
so much for
Vanesita.
joining.
Nos vemos.
Bye.
Chao, Reina.
Bye.
Chao, chao.
Gracias.
Ciao.
Chao.